Welcome, fellow educators, to this explainer. We're going to pack a truly comprehensive guide into an actionable toolkit designed to completely transform your classroom. If you teach English as a second language, or honestly, if you teach writing to anyone at all, you know that getting students to put pen to paper or fingers to keys can sometimes feel a bit like pulling teeth. But it really doesn't have to be that way. Today, we're unpacking some of the absolute best-kept secrets and practical strategies that every writing teacher should know. So let's start by validating a core struggle. Why is writing so intimidating for students? Well, for second language learners especially, it's often perceived as this solitary, daunting mountain they have to climb. Unlike speaking, which is inherently social and interactive, writing kind of feels like you're all alone with a blank page. The rules of grammar, spelling, organization, it can just feel completely overwhelming. But as their guide, you have the power to change that perception from an intimidating chore into a genuinely exciting process. Here's our syllabus for today's masterclass. We'll be covering 1. The 5-step writing process, 2. Anatomy of a perfect lesson, 3. Brainstorming and generating ideas, 4. Navigating the digital age, and finally, 5. Making writing fun again. Section 1. The 5-step writing process. All right, let's dive into our very first tool, which is all about establishing a foundational framework so students know right off the bat that they don't have to write perfectly on the very first try. By breaking the task into these 5 distinct steps, pre-writing, organizing, writing, editing, and rewriting, you completely prevent student paralysis. I mean, think about it. Very few native speakers start at the top of page 1 and write flawlessly to the bottom, right? Remind your students that a draft is exactly that, just a draft. It's not the final composition. When students strive for absolute perfection in step 3, the writing phase, the result is almost always a frozen blank stare. And this brilliantly illustrates how we can generate vocabulary early on in that pre-writing step. Actually, one of my favorite strategies is having them draw pictures. Sometimes your lower proficiency students simply don't have the vocabulary to articulate their complex ideas just yet. By having them draw out their ideas first, they completely sidestep those articulation issues. They're generating this rich visual bank of possibilities without having to simultaneously juggle complex grammar decisions. Fast forwarding to the editing step, assigning a partner to look for communicative gaps or breakdowns in meaning builds just incredible classroom trust. Peer editing really is a priceless experience. You can take the pressure off by giving them super specific parameters. For instance, ask them to find 3 grammatical errors and explain how to correct them, or ask them to look specifically for places where they get confused. This mutual sharing completely changes writing from a solitary lockdown into a really fun collaborative forum. Section 2. Anatomy of a perfect lesson. Now that we have the overarching process in our toolkit, let's move to how this actually builds into the chronological flow of a single perfect class period. Think of this timeline as a teacher's daily roadmap. It moves students systematically from out-of-seat speaking activities all the way down to independent production. If you have a 50-minute class, structuring your time exactly like this ensures your students aren't just sitting silently at their desks for an hour, which, let's face it, is a surefire way to lose their attention entirely. Notice how we shift pacing throughout these phases. It's so dynamic. You start with energetic speaking during the warm-up, maybe a quick interview game to get them moving. Then you slow down to introduce vocabulary and transition into structured practice, like choral repetition to build up that confidence. By the time they hit the produce phase at the 35-minute mark, they are primed and totally ready to actually write sentences independently. Finally, you finish with a review, having volunteers read their corrected answers aloud. This is absolutely crucial to avoid reinforcing any mistakes. It's just a perfectly paced progression. Section 3. Brainstorming and generating ideas. Let's tackle that dreaded blank page syndrome with our third set of tools, which are focused entirely on inspiration and creativity. Because getting the ideas out of a student's head and onto the paper is often the hardest part. You can rapidly deploy these methods to get those ideas flowing. Using flowcharting, for example, is incredibly effective if you want students to examine cause and effect relationships. Or you can use stream of consciousness free writing. Set a timer for 3 minutes and tell them their pen literally cannot stop moving. It doesn't matter if the grammar's terrible or the spelling is way off, the goal is simply to capture raw thoughts. If they're comparing 2 cultures, a double entry column is fantastic. These tools give students a concrete, actionable roadmap. What's really fascinating about mind mapping is how visually freeing the technique is. Imagine a student starting with a totally blank piece of paper. Instead of asking for a boring, linear list, you have them place their main topic, like wedding, right in the center. Then they visually branch out into fun subtopics. You've got bubbles for the dress, the ceremony, the romance, the guests. And from the ceremony, they branch out even further into vows and parents. It completely removes the intimidation factor. They can use colors, draw shapes, and organically grow their outline without stressing over rigid structure. Section 4. Navigating the digital age. Moving right along, let's talk about the world our students actually live in. We absolutely have to address written communication in the new millennium. The contrast here is pretty stark. Traditional academic writing demands strict grammar and full sentences, but the reality of texting and digital communication is, well, much different. In the digital world, spelling is creative, great becomes GR8, and subject dropping, that's incredibly common and fast for texting. Now, while dropping a subject might be grammatically perfect in a language like Spanish, in English, it forces the reader to make logical assumptions about who is actually performing the action. We really have to teach our students how to decipher these implied subjects in texts while clearly establishing the boundaries of when formal academic writing is strictly required. Part of navigating this digital age also means navigating the garbage. It's actually highly helpful to explicitly teach ESL students about spam. We all get these junk emails and texts, right? But a language learner might try to painstakingly translate a harmful phishing text. Teaching them what spam folders and filters are allows them to confidently ignore the junk and focus their valuable energy entirely on real language learning. Section 5. Making writing fun again. Finally, let's explore our last thematic toolkit, where we bring the whole shebang together with strategies for motivation and interactivity. A giant piece of paper is scary. But handing a student 6 brightly colored Post-it notes, that's inviting. You can use these for so many things. To teach a narrative arc, have a student draw their main character on the first sticky note, the setting on the second, the rising conflict on the third and fourth, and the resolution on the final one. They can arrange them right on their desk. It's a rapid, energetic, and highly visual way to make story planning completely approachable. They can also use them for sticky dialogue, leaving notes for each other on a bulletin board to create a literal, physical paper trail of conversation. Here's a massive secret to facilitating good writing: sharing. If a student knows no one but you will ever read their essay, their motivation plummets. Giving your students a real audience changes absolutely everything. Turn their written scripts into a video commercial they get to film. Post their essays on a public bulletin board in the school hallway, or host a fun classroom contest for the most unique character. When they know their peers are going to consume their work, it gives them a thrilling, genuine reason to perfect their grammar and really hone their ideas. Because ultimately, learning to write well is a lifelong process that builds cumulative skills. Every single writing skill leads directly to another. When students are properly inspired in your classroom, when they learn how to brainstorm visually, edit with their peers collaboratively, and publish proudly, they're going to carry these foundational habits with them for the rest of their lives, long after they've left your class. We've covered a massive amount of ground today, from the 5-step process in mind mapping to navigating TextSpeak and utilizing the pure magic of sticky notes. We hope this explainer has fully stocked your teacher's toolkit. So, I want to leave you with this final exciting thought. Look at the strategies we discussed today. Which one of these will you bravely try out in your classroom tomorrow? Get out there, grab some sticky notes, give your students an audience, and make writing absolutely unforgettable.